Good evening and welcome to What's Your Story? My guest today is Andrea Saunders. We hope tonight's show with a couple of quotes from two well-known strong women. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "A woman is like a tea bag. You never know how strong she is until she gets into hot water." Rosa Parks said, "God has always given me the strength to say what is right." I have no doubt that many of you watching tonight can easily tick off the names of several strong women. Tonight's story is about a gifted and strong woman. Welcome to the show, Andrea.
Thank you.
Let's start with what exactly is a strong woman?
You know, I've thought a lot about that. I think a strong woman is someone that is strong-minded, not necessarily strong of physical strength. They're comfortable in their own skin, making their own decisions, very capable, very balanced, not apologetic for who they are. Sort of being okay in their own skin. When I say that, I mean, despite what society may say, you know, it's being too skinny or being too fat or...
I mean, it's not about appearances.
Exactly. It's about how you feel in your own skin. And I think a lot of women have a problem with that. I did as a youngster, so I can certainly understand that.
You had that problem as a youngster?
Absolutely.
What problem did you...
Just growing up, I, as they say, kind of developed early, so I was teased a lot in school. And I think it just made me conscious throughout my, college years, just being conscious of my body and my weight and what I looked like and what society thought I should look like, and it's...
Yeah, the Barbie effect.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure on women. I don't think so much on men,
As I think of strong women throughout history, I think your comment about the body is particularly apropos because women are often, as you well know, judged on exactly that. How pretty their hair is, their eyes, and all that sort of stuff. Now, when you encounter a strong woman, what do you expect to find in her? When you walk into the room and start talking to her, can you say to yourself, now this is a strong woman?
Yeah, I think it's someone that can sort of take command of a room, speaks their own minds, not afraid to share their own opinions for fear of retribution for saying it. A lot of women aren't like that. They're very scared to tell people exactly what they think and feel. And so that kind of sometimes that can cloud communication with them because you really don't know, is that really where they're coming from? So,
and you think that fear to express themselves is somehow connected to how they are judged early in their lives?
Oh, it could be. Some people, I think it just depends on, maybe you had a father who didn't like hearing women's opinions. You never know if it's something coming from that, or it could be something you develop later in life. So
are you a strong woman?
I'd like to think that I am, yeah. I was raised by a strong woman.
Tell us about that.
I was raised by a single mom. I was the oldest of 3 kids. She was divorced, I think, when I was 2. So I have a brother that's 15 months younger than me, and then she had remarried, but then had gotten divorced. So I have a sister that's 8 years younger than me. And I had to watch my mother go through some hard times. When I look at my life now, I think it's hard, but not compared to what she had to go through. I'd see her walk a mile to bring my sister to daycare with no car, and then she'd have to walk another mile the other way to go to her waitress job. I saw her on food stamps when she said it was like the lowest point in her life. One thing she had to do it for 6 months when she was divorced the second time, simply because she needed to feed us. And she said it was just the worst time in her whole life. She did whatever she had to do, worked as many jobs and hours as she had to never have to do that again, because she was always very self-sufficient. And she taught all 3 of us to be that way and to always strive for more and be better than she was.
Do you attribute to your mother much of your outlook today?
Oh, absolutely. I tell everybody, out of me, my brother, and my sister, I have a degree in accounting, and I'm the least educated. My mother does not have a college degree. She's retired now, but she's always worked waitressing type jobs my whole entire life. And she always said to us, go to college, do more than I did. I can remember that as clear as she said it yesterday. Just as I was, and so my sister's, she's got a master's in psychology, and my brother's a lawyer. So you know, people say, oh, you have a degree in accounting, but like I said, I'm the least educated out of all of them. But I attribute all of that to her. She raised us on her own with really no financial support from either father. And, you know, I look back and I think that's why I think that I am strong. That's why I can get through anything, because I saw what she went through.
Absolutely.
And she got through everything way worse than anything I've ever gone through today. I mean, she had basic issues about how am I going to feed my children and get a car and give them a better life.
Keep a roof over their
exactly.
head.
That's not any kind of issues I've ever had to deal with as an adult.
Wow,
So.
wow. So tell me something. When you think back, is your mother still with us?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, she'll be here on May 3rd.
She'll be here on May 3rd.
Yeah.
Terrific. So she'll get a chance to see her daughter, a strong woman, on TV there. Okay. Do you still communicate with your mother about your life and what's going on and the journey that you're on?
Sometimes. We mostly talk these days. I like to kind of find out about her because she's getting up there in years, and she lives in Seattle, so I don't see her a lot. So we talk a lot about what's going on with her and her health, and she's a diabetic, so I always talk to her and try to make sure she's taking care of herself. She lives with my sister, so I just like to find out how she's doing. If she's, you know, having diabetes the past 5 years has changed her life in a way that I don't think she imagined before that. So I just want to make sure she's getting out and she's going to the doctors and taking her medication, and just, you know, my sister takes good care of her, so I shouldn't worry, but I'm the oldest, so I worry.
So look, let's give Mom a shout out here. Say hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom. How's it
there you
going?
go. There we go. Mom, you got a shout out. Okay, now we can continue with this strong woman that you brought to our studios today. So tell me something, Andrea. Why do you think men are put off by strong women? Why do you think that is?
I don't know if it's just, you know, it's people say men feel. What's the terminology? They feel emasculated.
Okay.
You know, to have a strong woman, a lot of times it's a competition. And men can compete with other men because that's what they grew up knowing how to do. But I think sometimes it's hard for men to compete with women, whether it's politically, for a job. I mean, obviously not on the home front. I don't think men compete with women on the home front, but I definitely think men were raised. I almost don't care what family you were in. If it was a certain generation, they were just raised to sort of be the strong one, and they were the ones that had to be the providers, and I just think that's how men look at it. That's from what I can see.
So you see it more as a gender thing,
yeah,
not
absolutely.
a cultural thing.
No, it probably is a cultural thing. I think there are many. You know, it's funny. I was watching just today. I was watching the president talk. It was Women in Science, and he had his daughter next to him, and he was talking to a woman astronaut, and
Yeah.
I was actually looking at him thinking that he, you know, as much as people perceive him a certain way towards women, and it's just coincidental that I happened to see this today because it was a press conference, but his daughter is sitting right next to him.
Yep.
And she's got equal voice. And I heard after that she's getting ready, the German chancellor invited her over to Germany where she's going tomorrow to be involved in a big summit. And I was thinking, you know, she's obviously a very strong woman raised by a man who people think has something against women. But look, you know, his sons are wonderful too, but you look at his daughter, the one that is by his side, and she's an extremely strong woman, and it just kind of caught me considering I was coming here today.
You were struck by the irony
I
of it.
probably wouldn't have said her name as being a strong woman, but she's on my mind.
Right.
I saw that and I was thinking about that, and I know that she's got a husband and 3 children, and he's got a job, and she's trying to get a new household in Washington, D.C., and so I'm like, she's doing a lot for trying to help this country, trying to help her father, trying to run her family, and, you know, trying to be a woman, and she has her own clothing line, trying to be a woman that has it all. And
so when you think about strong women in history, do any women come to your mind?
Sure, and I was thinking of Susan B. Anthony.
And what was it about Susan B. Anthony?
Well, she was first, you know, she had that silver dollar. Who's the woman? I'm sorry.
That's okay. Just roll with it.
Voting rights for women.
So let's stick with Susan B. Anthony.
No.
So she had the silver dollar. So she was for birth control rights. Margaret Sanger was in there with her as well.
Yep.
There were many other women who were leaders in the struggle for suffragette, for women to vote.
And for women to have equality. And
it's still amazing to me that it took, I believe, until the 1920s before women could actually vote. That's still an amazing historical fact to me, that the reason you were denied the vote was solely because you were female and nothing else. I mean,
and that's why it bothers me today when people, especially women, take for granted a right that a lot of women had to die for.
Oh, let's take for granted, huh?
Yeah.
So when do you see that? You see that in younger women, not appreciating that they had to stand on others' female shoulders to get where they are?
I don't know if it's, I don't want to say not appreciate. I'm sure that when women or when people say they're not going to go vote, and it could be men equally, but
sure.
I just think people get caught up in their lives and they don't think about what other women had to go through to give them the right to vote. But I just feel like it's a freedom that women didn't have in the 1920s or before that, and a lot of people around the world, men and women, don't have in their own countries. And that I think it's a right that we should embrace. And, I vote every year for every election that I can, unless I'm just physically not able.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just think it's important, and I think it's a cop-out when people say their vote doesn't count. I don't believe that.
Well, I was fortunate enough to love history, and I took my sons to the Women's Hall of Fame in Seneca Falls, New York. And I walked through that museum and I saw women that I hadn't learned about in school, and I learned some of the things that they did. I learned about people like Frederick Douglass and his support for the women and their rights to vote, because what obviously historically is true is the same powers that suppressed you are the same powers that suppressed people of color. So what happened was they formed natural bonds to work together to overcome the shackles. I think that's a fabulous piece of American history that should be taught to the schools starting in kindergarten. I really do. Look, I love history. I'd teach history before the baby was born if I could figure out some kind of way to do that. But one thing I want to tell you about a strong woman, my mother was a strong woman too. And much of what your mother lived through, mine did too. Trying to figure out how to feed these kids. How do I do what I have to do? And I was so struck by my mother that one day for Mother's Day, my mother's gone now, but one day for Mother's Day, I wrote the following lines and sent them to my mother. In the miraculous womb where my life began, it was my mother's blood that made me a man. And she never forgot those lines.
That's nice.
Because that's the way I thought about this. So do you have children or no girls? Or
I have a boy.
One boy. And what are you doing to teach him to respect women and deal with women in the society that we're in today?
He's 31. He lives in Florida, and it's a very different. He lives in South Florida. Let me preface that by saying, I think it's a very different culture down there, and so. My husband and I both talk to him a lot about, he talks to us a lot about going out on dates and what he should do with women. And, so I'm always kind of giving him little, tidbits about how we should, please and thank you and open their door and just, certain things. Because sometimes he's an only child, so he doesn't always think like that.
So is he mama's boy?
No. He's definitely his father. He's definitely his father's boy.
Okay, all right.
But I put my he probably talks to his dad more, but I put my 2 cents in there when I can. And if I think that he's going down a path with women, I'll just say, maybe you should back up and maybe try a little, I don't tell him, I say, maybe you should try a little different approach. And, I think one of the things I tell him though is when you find somebody, because he had this issue before with a girl he went out with for a long time, they should like your family. If you're going to marry them,
that's true. You're going to marry their family.
You're going to marry their family.
Absolutely,
they're going to marry your
are.
family. So if they don't like your family or the job you have,
yes, that's
probably not a girl you want to stay with long term. If they can't appreciate what you do for work to bring food home and your family, and if you're close with your family, I would always tell them I think that's a problem. I think you should kind of move along, find somebody else.
One of the things I think about when I think about women in general, first of all, is I believe they're smarter than we are. I just really believe that because they have to think on a different plane than we do. So I believe that they could be in our heads more quickly and figure out what we need to do. God knows I was in a family with strong women. I've been around women all my life, and I really recognize my shortcomings as pointed out to me by them. So my question to you is this. When you encounter a strong man, do you feel cowed a little bit or bullied or want to back away from a strong guy, sort of in your face kind of guy, trying to put you in your place as a woman? You know where your place is. They don't say that anymore.
Right. I don't know. I guess it would depend on the person and the situation.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, no. I think over the years, I'm more comfortable today than I ever have been in my own skin and my own abilities and things that I've done in my life. I'm more confident. So I think at this point, I would say no, that doesn't bother me. Or sometimes I have to just figure out where they're coming from. See, I believe this when you talk about men and women.
Yeah.
Men, I truly believe, can only really think and do single tasks. I'm sure there are other guys that can, but I think women are used to multitasking.
Okay.
We can be on the phone and yelling at our dogs and trying to unload the dishwasher. Like, we can do many things at one time. And I think a lot of times men, they're just focused on one task at a time. And women just don't have that luxury. Because we're the caretakers, and we're generally the people that take care of the children and take care of the house. And so now that we have to add work on top of that, we're just used to doing more things at one time. So.
Well, certainly it's no surprise to see that sexual harassment is in the news, and it's a ever-present thing. I read a statistic somewhere that said that 1 in 5 college girls will be assaulted at school while she's at a 4-year school. And I'm just wondering, did you ever have to deal with anything like that in the workplace, or do you know anyone, any females that had to deal with that, and what advice did you give them?
Actually, ironically, I worked at a company for 10 years, and I was in accounting, and I was the manager. And this is actually not a story I don't think I've ever shared publicly, but there was a woman that was from an accounting temp agency that we were working with, and
yes,
I was training her, and I have a habit sometimes, like if I'm talking to you, I might touch your hand.
Okay, all right.
And one day, I was brought into human resources and told that this woman felt sexually harassed.
Okay.
And it was very shocking because that's, I'm very much about, look, this is my space, this is your space. I've never encountered harassment like that in me, but I can kind of gauge, to me, whether I need to back off or whatever the situation is. And so it was
so you have that internal meter there that
kind
tells
of,
you.
yeah.
Or
if it just doesn't feel comfortable.
Absolutely.
I know when it doesn't, and I can back away.
Yep.
And so to hear that, to have human resources call, and they didn't take any credence, and nothing was done. It wasn't that, and it was we just simply didn't have the lady return. But it was that was like really surreal. Like I thought it was a joke at first. I'm like, is this for, that's absolutely not who I am. I wouldn't want that done to me. I would never do that to someone else. But it was just that simple. And that's what they said. Just a simple thing of touching her hand when I was talking to her made her feel uncomfortable. And she didn't feel comfortable enough to say to me that it made her feel uncomfortable. Therefore, she reported it to Human Resources. So
well, do you not think it's a good thing that that apparatus is in place for women to report? However you might think valid the complaint is.
There are women, I think, who have valid complaints that do go report it, and that is the mechanism to do it. But then I think there are a lot of women who are very sensitive to certain things, So men call you honey. I think if you know the person, if that's how they are, but I think a lot of women can be very sensitive to stuff like that, or baby or whatever. And so sometimes I think it's, I think it's a great place for women to report actual sexual harassments. I think it's so much perception and how you feel and what makes you comfortable and uncomfortable. So it's not for me to say. I can only talk about my own, what it would be if it was me, but I think. And
in your own experiences and jobs, you've never had to deal with anything like that yourself?
Nope, not that I can honestly say I don't think I've ever had to deal with sexual harassment.
Well, you're one of the lucky ones from what I hear. My goodness, yeah. Andrea, do you feel that your gender has helped you or hurt you in life?
I don't think of it either way. I don't think it's, I don't say that it helped. I don't look at it as a hindrance or a help. I say it is what it is. I was raised to think that anything I wanted to do, I could do. And so I, sort of took it that way. Now, being the oldest of 3 kids, being raised in a single family home, I'm definitely the most conservative, and I'm not talking about politically, but just in general, of my brother and my sister.
Yep.
Simply because, I'm more cautious. I guess because I took care of them when they were smaller, and so I tend to, they're a little more, I don't want to say free-spirited, but they definitely, throw caution to the wind more easily than I do. So, no, I don't actually look at it that way. I don't think it, like I said, I don't think it was a hindrance or a help. It just is sort of I don't ever feel like I did or did not get something based on my gender.
Okay.
I always feel like in my mind, I was taught to go get what you want. And I don't think I've ever, like I said, not gotten a job or gotten a job based on, or anything based on the fact that I was a woman. So.
And so, you talked about your mother being a single mother, and often the fathers were non-involved and didn't support the kids and that sort of thing. Has that colored your judgment about men?
You know, it's funny. I have people say to me, did you miss having a father? And I would say, and I have a good relationship with my father now.
So your father's still with us too?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, we got to give a shout out to Dad.
Hey, Dad.
There we go. Okay, go ahead now.
Dad's probably on the beach in Florida listening to jazz music.
There we go. Okay. But
just growing up, my dad had remarried, and I lived in New Orleans, and he lived with his second family in New Jersey. He was in the Navy.
Yes.
So I didn't get to see him a lot. And people say, did you miss not growing up with a dad? And I said, I didn't miss what I didn't have. I grew up without a dad, and that's just the way it was for me. I had no ill will towards him. And then when I was old enough that I could start going to see him wherever he was, I did. And so I basically have I've had an adult relationship with him, not so much as a kid. So probably once I graduated college on is the relationship I have with him now. So I don't really think of it as a kid-child, even though he's my father. We just have a relationship, so.
So you just mentioned New Orleans. You have a connection to New Orleans, don't you?
I do. I was raised down there.
Well, tell us about that New Orleans connection there.
I know. What's so funny is you didn't say that. That phrase happened when I left, because nobody said New Orleans when I lived
Nobody
there.
says that.
Well, I lived in two different areas. My mother, and it's funny, my mother and my father, my dad's brothers, and my mom's friends, they lived on what they called the East Bank.
Okay, the East Bank.
And they all went to the same high school, East Jefferson High School.
Okay. And
then you got the city of New Orleans, and then right across the bridge is West Bank. So when my mom and her second husband, when they divorced, we moved to the West Bank, and that's where I grew up.
So people want to know about Mardi Gras. When did you first experience Mardi Gras living there? What age?
I had to be a small child. I mean, when you live there, like people say, oh, did you like Mardi Gras? When you live there, you don't.
It's no big deal.
It's a way of life. You're sort of like going to, like the St. Patrick's Day parade that is thrown in Hartford every year. I mean, it's just something that you go to. It's part of it's kind of the same thing, 3 weeks before Fat Tuesday. All of a sudden, you start going to local parades. You want to know where your high school band is playing so you can go see them.
All right.
It's just something we did. And at least where we lived, that Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, Fat Tuesday.
Yes.
Those were holidays. Those were school days that we got off of school because that was what we did. And so my mother, I have to tell you that my mother's one of the only people that I know that actually lived there she was not crazy about Mardi Gras.
Okay.
She didn't like the crowds or anything.
Okay. All right.
So a lot of times I'd have to go with my friends or their parents or whatever. But no, I loved Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras was just a way of life. I never thought of it any way different, So it's so funny. I took my husband there once back in 2001, and it was great watching him experience Mardi Gras through his eyes.
Yes.
Because
it's old hat to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
So
if you were talking to, I guess I shouldn't assume you don't, do you do any work with women or young girls in volunteer service to women or young girls or young women's group? Or what advice would you give, say, a young woman who's about to graduate high school? What advice would you give her about charting her own course in life, being a strong woman? What would you tell her?
It's sort of like graduation for the high school is getting ready to come up, and I always, as the chairwoman of the Board of Ed, I always give the speech on behalf of the board. And I just think I can give it to a girl, but I would give it to a boy as well. I just think if college is for you, you do that. If it's not and you want to go around the world and, go backpacking through Europe, do that. I think women today just have no limits. They can do or be whatever they want, and I think that women should go for that. Actually, I found a friend that I was talking to a friend that I grew up with in New Orleans today, because I'm going down there in June for a few days with some girlfriends.
All right.
Her daughter's going to Hawaii for 4 months on a job. And I said, that's the way to do it, to be young and carefree. And she has the option to go do that, where for me, actually growing up, I didn't feel like I had that option simply because of financial constraints. But just today, women can just do or be whatever they want, and I think that they should. I think they should not let anyone tell them they can't, even if that means trying to go be the first woman president. I think that women should. You
think we'll see that in our lifetime? First woman president?
It's hard to say. You know, for me, I don't think any woman should be president, just like any man shouldn't be president. I think it should be the right candidate. I mean, you know, I look at the candidates last year, at least on the Republican side for president, and I loved Carly Fiorina. I thought she was wonderful, and I thought she was a very strong woman. I admired the fact that she was a CEO, and even though that didn't work out, I felt like she talked about it, and she didn't steer away and say, not my problem, not my fault. She stood up.
Right in there and
talked
went
about it.
toe-to-toe.
She says yes, but you know what? Sometimes you got to make hard decisions.
That's right.
And people didn't like that answer.
Okay.
But if it would have been a man, they would have said, "Oh yeah, that's right," because that's what you have to do in business. Well, it's equally if it's a woman CEO. Sometimes
Absolutely.
you have to make hard choices, and I really liked her. So I was actually a little, I was downtrodden that she couldn't, that she didn't make it. But
good. Well, that's all the time we have for tonight's show. My thanks to my guest, Andrea Saunders, for sharing her story. Thank you for tuning in. Our stories are as different as each snowflake and are as beautiful and numerous as the stars. Everybody has a story. What's yours? Until next time, good night.